We touched upon it earlier as well. And then probably a little bit about change and that's the plan for the session. Why is organization culture important and what is it actually? So all of you have heard this term out. I'm sure your bosses have talked about it. They say this organization culture is good, this culture is not so good. What does it mean?
The practices, the values, the organization
Practices and the values, okay, that an organization
carry.
Okay. What else? What else? Why is an organization culture important?
It gives sense of belongingness to employees.
It gives a sense of belongingness to employees. What else does it give?
Uniform.
Gives uniformity, okay. What else does it give?
Maybe emphasis on empowerment.
Emphasis on people feel empowered,
Yeah.
in a culture that they understand.
They're free to speak.
Right to be.
Yeah. They can have
So,
their
so
share
say
of.
people in the armed forces are not free to speak. Do you feel they are disempowered?
So,
No?
as you taught us in past, why that leader command is important, so that I do not have a 10 opinions to go straight or a left. Okay, but in our organization, everybody has their own thought in terms of progressing on a particular project or a given task or a thought process to take it forward. That's
Just, it's right. I mean, the culture gives you a sense of belonging. It sort of gives sense to an organization. But what is the most important thing it does?
the cultures.
Work-life balance, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't exist. What exactly is work-life balance? That they pay you without expecting work, or they pay you on your terms? What? I've never found it. What is work-life? No, according to you, what is work-life? Work-life.
So maintaining personal life and professional life.
Like what? Like, I mean, how do you maintain that? So, what does it mean?
By not burning out your energy and efforts in one side. That is what
Why you even if you're doing the wrong job, you will definitely burn out. Like we looked at job characteristic model and work design. If you're in the wrong job, you will eventually burn out. Whatever kind of work-life balance you seem to have. Why is it that some people who are in very stressful jobs seem to keep going on and on and on and on? They don't burn out. So they don't seem to have work-life balance.
motivation.
Yeah, so you have to be really careful with these terms because they're very interesting words, work-life balance. How much of time do I get to spend with, say, my family or kids? These are all personal choices. I don't think there is one prescription to define what exactly is it. So, for example, Amazon has this ultra aggressive culture, which actually some people thrive in. So Amazon has figured out that some people like that kind of culture. Yeah? They don't talk about work-life balance. They talk about how many number of stocks you might get more. Yeah? So actually you might not like to work in such organizations, but there are people who want to work. What is it? What is one thing about culture that is so important? Why do we keep talking about culture?
Highly more cultured organization will be of highly ethical, more moral, and more transparency.
Okay. You think so, really?
Yeah, if the culture is very good, then the employees also will be motivated. They are more liberated and more contributed towards the.
So, there's this, yesterday we were doing this case, I remember somebody here on Enron and your group, right? And, Enron had a culture where their CTO would bring strippers to the office in the night. That was their culture. So do you think it's a good culture? It motivated them apparently to work harder. So is it a good culture? You don't know what's slipper, is it? Anwar, you please Google it. So is that a good, I mean, no, you're not still answering my question. Why is culture so important to us?
So it defines behavior from the
It defines many things. What else does it define?
Shared behavior.
Shared values, yes, very correct. What else? What is the, why do organizations want? So for example, I think I mentioned this about, and I forgot to bring that bottle, I've got one bottle of an American blockbuster drug manufactured by Johnson and Johnson. For pain, the common pain, right? You can have a headache or you can have an arm ache, Tylenol. This gave it about 70 to 75% of its revenues in the United States. And it was their blockbuster drug. 25 years back, somebody mischievous introduced cyanide into this bottle. And innocent people took it and about 10 of them died almost immediately. What would you do if you were the CEO of Johnson?
You withdraw all the
Bottles. It's very easy to say here in an air-conditioned classroom. But then that's going to cost you a couple of $1 billion. So that's exactly what Johnson and Johnson did. They tracked down every bottle and called it back. And they improvised. They stopped manufacturing the drug and they improvised on the security of the. So today it's very difficult to open that bottle actually. You need to be a little smart to open that bottle. Yeah. And I would have brought it if I knew that I was going to talk about. But and then when the CEO was asked why he moved so swiftly, he said that our culture defines that safety is very important and we protect the doctors who prescribe our. But he didn't talk about the end customer. He talked about the doctors who prescribe their. And that is what culture gives you. Culture gives you a sense of purpose, particularly in a crisis. What can I do? Otherwise, it can leave you pretty rudderless. You may not know exactly what to do when you are in a tough situation, but a strong organization culture with a shared value system pretty much gives you an indication as to what you might be able to do, what you should be doing. So we also did the case on the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, right? And the big problem there was the CEO was lying, hiding things. He may not have been lying outright, but he was not sharing. The disclosure part was a bit shaky. He was not exactly talking about, and this also goes to a very interesting case on 3 Mile Long Island, where America had a very large nuclear reactor, and that was close to a meltdown, and they kept systematically lying about what the safety issues were. And actually, it would have wiped out pretty large area, and many major cities had it. So again, if you have a strong culture, there's a good chance that you have a roadmap for following process in a difficult situation. And that's why companies talk about culture. So those are the good parts. What are the not so good parts? For example, if when you go, say when I went to the National Defense Academy Service Selection Board several years back, one of the questions that was asked to me was, are your parents in the armed forces? So I said no. Well, my father was selected, but he didn't join. This is a big deal. So any uncle, cousin, anybody in the armed forces? Is that a problem? So I learned later that if you have some relatives in the armed forces who are very close, like parents, you get some extra weightage. Why? Because you understand the culture before you, and that can also be a little bit of a negative because you get so used to a culture that it might become a problem for you to, accept or adapt to new. So, for example, you are working in, and that's why people who come from several of these places find it difficult to adapt to other. Just think about it. If you shift organizations, maybe you do so because somebody pays you a little bit more, but have you ever considered what the culture is of the new place? Whether it sits well with your value system or your, how do you look at life in general? And that is the problem, again, coming back to you with what you call as work-life balance. For example, say you're working with Adobe, which has got a pretty decent friendly culture. And because Amazon paid you more money, you jumped ship and went and joined. And then you found this ultra aggressive, you know, work hard, party harder kind of culture. You can't complain about work-life balance. Yeah. So companies define their own culture. Good companies define their own culture. There are many companies which have no culture at all, which can actually, which is it a problem? If you have no culture at all? It is, but generally, yeah, but generally, people, organizations like to have a set culture which defines them. You look at all, say you look at Infosys, they have culture, you look at TCS, they have culture, look at Reliance, they have their own culture, and so on and so. Yeah. Anybody wants to add anything on culture? No? Environment is a very big span of activities. So environment can also impact, say, external stakeholders, people who are in some ways connected to the organization, and so on. So, for example, tomorrow we decide to close shop here. Nayan Sagar University has shut this campus. Whom will it impact? All of us will get transferred. Who else will it impact? Not necessarily, students also will get transferred. First fellow who will get impacted is that who come because the nearby people selling idli vada to all our students and faculty, people like you and so on. That is the environment. Yeah, it might also positively impact traffic on the Hosur. That is the environment. When you talk about culture, it is more internal to a specific organization. Have I made some sense? Okay. So so some of the things that you should know by the end of this sort of session, or you read this chapter, is describe the common characteristics of the organization culture. Compare the functional and dysfunctional effects. We just talked about it, a few of them. So the dysfunctional part of organization culture is that it can actually make you very rigid. And you can say that I don't want to accept. So when I joined academia as an assistant professor, I kept telling myself I'm not captain anymore. That is a different past life. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to. And I had that problem because after I got off, I just came from the Netherlands and I joined a small IT company, mid-sized IT company as a director HR. And it was a problem for me because I found a lot of these software engineers thought they were very cool. In my opinion, they didn't know much. Most of them were, a little shabby and unkept most of the time. And it was a culture problem. But that didn't happen with the.
Is organization and culture related to vision and mission of the organization?
Everything is related to vision and mission. Yeah, so for example, if the vision or the mission of, say, a company like 3M, you heard of 3M, what does it do? So when you hear about 3M, what do you visualize? So when I hear about Apple, what do I visualize? Yeah, but the big picture, the 50,000 feet. What does Apple represent? What else?
Quality.
What else?
Security.
What else?
Luxury.
What is the most important thing? Innovation. It's a very innovative organization. That's why Apple's market capitalization is almost that of India's GDP. Just think about it. Yeah, it is about maybe 10 times that of Pakistan's. Because they are. So do you think their culture should match that innovative drive or no? So on one hand, you want to innovate. On another hand, you have a culture that is non-risk taking. You have everybody who comes and sits at the table and then looks at the boss and says, "Sir, what should I do today morning?" Do you think you can drive innovation with that kind of a culture? Obviously, the answer is that yes, many of these things are, and I'm glad you asked that question because in management, many of these things play off against. They are not, you can't operate in a silo. You can't take, I'll have one vision, I'll have one mission, I'll have strategy, I'll have objectives, I'll have a culture, I'll have some norms, and so on and so forth. And all of these work in isolation. They don't, they work as a sort of a unit. Yeah. So a strong culture can both be functional as well as dysfunctional. Identify the factors that create and sustain an organization. What are the factors that create an organization's culture? What are some factors?
I think you just mentioned mission and vision is closely related.
What else are there? Yeah, it is.
So basically, what is the vision of your company and what are the plans you have for your company? I think that very much closely decide how you want to have that behavior in your organization. What culture you want to invite, that people can see a long-term perspective or hopping 3 years and then some other company. So maybe that kind of thing can decide what culture you want to have somewhere.
So the question here is the factors that create and sustain an organization's culture. What is one single most important factor that creates and sustains?
Training.
Leadership, yes, very good. Yeah. What about leadership? You set an example, very good. Can you give me an example of setting an example?
Leadership by example.
Good English. Give me an example. Infosys Murthy, who refused to pay a bribe.
Right.
Very good. Okay, that's a good example. What else? So the ability of, so Narayan Murthy set the culture of, it's pretty much common knowledge. Whether he walks the talk is whether the person who sets the culture. Culture always emanates from the top and not from the bottom. Yeah. So whether the senior management is very true, and there's this very interesting case which you have not got. It's on the Aluminum Corporation of America, Alcoa. Alcoa is one of the biggest public sector companies, government owned, and they were having a problem that they were close to closing down. And the government decided to hire a guy who was an accountant. Yeah, they hired a guy and placed him as CEO. And so Wall Street actually panicked because they said Alcoa is already in a mess, and they've hired some guy who really doesn't know the business of aluminum manufacturing. So eventually he went, it took over, their share prices tanked on the first day. And so a press meet was called and they asked him, how will you handle Alcoa's problems? And he said, I am going to look at safety. So people were a bit shocked. They said that you have been just put in here as CEO and we expect some miraculous turnaround from you. And you are talking about safety, which is really not pertinent to the whole story. Where this guy, made his name, stuck to his guns, and he said that anybody who follows unsafe practices in Alcoa will be sacked. And it so happened that one of his one day in his office he had a set of 3 nuns. You know what's a nun, right? Catholic So they turned up and they said, look, we have got a plant in New Mexico and you guys talk so much about safety, but we had an accident and 3 people died. And what are you going to do about it? And then he said, okay, I will look into it. And he had not heard of this particular accident. So he asked for reports and he found that his very close friend who was managing that unit had not reported this particular incident or accident. Yeah. And what should you do as CEO? What would you do if your very good friend was responsible for something? Give him a cautionary note.
So for safety, I think it should be strict action.
So he had sacked immediately, fired on the spot, and they made a example. So good CEOs who want to reinforce culture or what they're talking about, walk the talk. Yeah, they deliver on what they talk or what the organization's culture is all about. Yeah. So if you dilly-dally at that time and then people are confused, you're not going to make much of headway. How is culture transmitted to employees? How is culture transmitted? How do employees get to hear about your organization's culture? Do you make a PPT and put it up, this is our culture?
As said that our vision statement we have with our visions, whatever the company's objectives, vision, we should be aligned with that. So then we can imbibe the cultures of the organization.
Okay, what else? What else?
Can include it in the training.
You can pass it on, disseminate information. What else? So that is why stories are very. So for example, there's a story about Wipro. Not too many stories. There's one interesting story about how Azim Premji landed up at the Bengaluru airport, and his work had not gone to. There was some sort of lack of communication, and his work had not gone to pick him up. So what does he do? He gets into an auto and comes to the. And that's actually spoken a lot about in Wipro as, how the CEO, at that time he was one of the richest people in, probably the richest person in India, and one of the richer people in the world, was prepared to travel like a common man in an auto. So we are firmly, and I think Narayan Murthy tries to emphasize that time. We are middle class. We are not an elitist organization. And it's very important because if you look at one of the greatest failures of two companies merging, they are Daimler. Daimler manufactures what? Mercedes-Benz and Chrysler. So one was this ultra luxurious car, and other one was a middle class American. So when they merged, it was called the marriage of the century. The problem was it failed within about 2 years. The big reason being that Daimler executives always stayed 5-star. Chrysler said they will not go beyond 3-star. It started with small things like that, and it sort of escalated into major issues because their cultural differences were. So if you have different cultures, you can also have problems with mergers. If you acquire a company, it's fine because then you can impose your culture on a new merger. You know what's acquiring a company? Give me an example of acquisition. Infosys keeps acquiring small companies. Big company acquired. Tata acquired what?
Big master.
Jaguar. What is it they acquired?
Ford and GL. Ford and GL. Then after started acquired GL.
Lakshmi Mittal acquired a steel plant in Belgium. Yeah, it ran into problems immediately because of the difference in language. Where as far as he was concerned, the corporate language is English. The corporate language for the steel mill, large one, was French or Flemish, right? And they refused to speak English. So what did he do? What do you think he did? Translate. Okay, what else could he do?
He replaced with those people who can listen to
He
you.
sent a note saying that I'll give you 1 year to learn English, although you cannot learn, can be, or you'll be kicked out. Yeah, so that is what happens in an acquisition. When you acquire a company, when you merge, there is a bigger problem because you are your partners. There are two partners. There are two equals coming together.
No one can hope our other.
You can't sort of pass a diktat and say that, look, this is my way of doing things, so you better follow me. Yeah. So, storytelling, I think I told you stories about Nordstrom. I told you another story about Marriott and how they promote customer friendliness. We looked at the Taj, when the Taj was attacked by terrorists, how many people responded, how many of their, how their staff responded because of their, and Ratan Tata says it is our culture, because of our culture, we were sort of, it sort of showed employees how to behave. So describe the similarities and differences in creating an ethical culture, a positive culture, and a spiritual culture. So, what is an ethical culture? You all know what's an ethical culture. Where you sort of work ethically, do not do. What is ethics exactly?
If you're ethically right, then there is a
What is ethically being right?
there is a saying that if a person commits a crime and is punishable in the court of law, it's legal, it comes as legal. But if a person think of doing so, that wrong thing, is a criminal in terms of moral or ethics. So ethical is beyond the legal things.
So have you never been unethical in that sense? When you never thought about wrong things?
We are not supposed to.
No, but I'm asking you. You have.
I know, but I am trying to reduce much.
And how far have you succeeded?
Yes, sir, I am succeeding a bit.
So this is a very interesting story from, I think, Denmark of this king, the powerful king, and he is a very proud king. Yeah, very proud king. And he believes that he's very rich and handsome and so on and so forth. And of course, many of you have heard this story, but I will repeat. So this guy once gets a visitor. And there are two people who have turned up at the gates of the city. And they say that they are master tailors. Tailor. And they are master tailors. And the king, the message goes from the guards to the head of the security, then goes to the prime minister, who transmits it to the king. And then they say two tailors. And the king is very fond of fine clothes because he's a very proud. He thinks he must look good all the time. So eventually, through some route, the two tailors reach the king. And he asked them, what can you do? They said, look, you give us enough of time and we can stitch you clothes that nobody has had ever. So he says, brilliant. And what do you want? So they say, we want this much of fine gold to make into thread. We want the finest cotton from India. We want needles and this thing. And nobody should disturb us for 1 year. And we should get great food and you must give us this much of money and so on. Everything is accepted. Then they go into practice. At the end of 1 year, they turn up and they say there's only one condition, that stupid people cannot see the clothes. So the king said, okay, that's reasonable. Stupid people cannot see the clothes. So they come and they make a drama of putting clothes on the king and so king also cannot see it. But then he has heard that only stupid people can't see the clothes. And he then asks his prime minister, how do you think I look? The prime minister also can't see anything. But he thinks that I can't admit now that I'm stupid. So he says the clothes are brilliant and I can see the fold. Good. To cut a long story short, the king wants to show the entire city his new clothes. He goes to the city. Everybody has heard the story, but nobody pipes in except for one small girl who says, but the king has got no clothes. And he's stark naked. And then the girl's father gives the girl one tight slap and says, shut up. What happens in your organization? Yeah? What is the context here? Why do you think this happened? Why do you think that till that small kid piped in and said that the king has no clothes? Why do you think anybody else in the supply chain didn't say a thing? What was the overlying context? So were they unethical? Do you think this is unethical?
But they are afraid of telling the truth.
Yeah, so the overlying context here is fear. Yeah, and I can promise you, if you levy enough of fear on people, humans, ethics goes for a 6. This is a classic case of ethics not being followed because you developed a culture of fear. The culture of fear was there right from the beginning, so it gave rise to unethical practices. And most organizations are actually least followed. They keep talking about ethics. They will also levy fear on their people and say that, if you find that you are talking too much, or if you are sort of pointing, if you're blowing the whistle, we will have you fired. And so people don't speak up, except for the little kid, who probably did not know what fear was. Yeah, and so you need more people like that little kid in organizations such as yours, who tell the management the truth and say that you are actually have no clothes on. No, but then it's really difficult because I'm sure all of you have that EMI, and then you have to pay for whatever you bought, and so on. So you play along. Yeah. So ethics cannot be divorced from culture. If you develop enough of fear in the system, people are pretty much going to fall in line, and your ethics can go for a. There are very few companies which will buck that trend and say, we will not buy into your. Google used to do that for a long time. So they don't do evil or don't be evil policy. And like I was mentioning the other day, they stepped out of China because the Chinese government was telling them not to show Tiananmen Square. You know what's Tiananmen Square? So several years back, the students in China protested against the dictatorship of China, and then they gathered in central Beijing in a place called Tiananmen, and they were protesting there. There were about anything from 3,000 upwards students like this, yeah, younger students. And the Chinese government told them to go home once, twice, thrice. They then bought tanks and blew them. And they bought tanks. They did not even use guns. They bought tanks and fired into the crowd. And that has become a pain point for the Chinese government. They are not able to stop people talking. So any search engine which goes to China is told that you have to hide this Tiananmen Square massacre. And Google said that we can't do it. So then Google left China. So ethics and fear and culture all go hand in hand. And positive culture is generally a culture which aligns with your vision, mission, strategy, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, you can be pulling in 2 different directions. Spiritual culture. What is spiritual culture? Spiritual culture. Spiritual. What is spirituality?
Some CSR activities can also be show the spirituality.
So like those guys from IBM who went to that Nirbhaya's protest and said, we are from IBM. They held a placard. That, yes, sir.
But that cannot be spiritual.
No, I don't know. I mean,
No, that
what is your point of view?
no, that cannot be, that maybe, he was supporting morally or ethically, that has happened is wrong. We just went to.
So spiritual, yeah, spiritual quotient, the spiritual culture are all new age things. And of course, India, we have been spiritually inclined for hundreds of thousands of years maybe. So it doesn't it doesn't look strange. But for several other societies, spirituality, talking about spirituality, unfortunately it gets mixed with religion. And under the same thing, spirituality and religion, they will cross, the paths will cross somewhere. And so it becomes a issue. But today people are talking about, I am not, I mean, I really don't know too much about what is a spiritual culture. Can any of your organizations talk about it? Spiritual culture? What is this?
Many organization nowadays is started
What does it mean exactly? What do they expect from you?
towards spirituality of moksha and other karma, do your things.
That's a very Hindu thing. But not say other religions don't believe in moksha, and so on and so forth, because for them it is one lifetime. Done. That's what I said. So when you talk about say karma or you talk about moksha, or nirvana, they're very Hindu Buddhist thing. How do say Christians or people who are Muslims react to this? Or say if you are a Hindu and you are told that there's only one lifetime and then you just disappear after that. May your soul rest in peace. And how would you react if you're a Hindu? So these are tricky things, but I think it's spiritualism in the workplace is something that is developing. For my understanding, it means that can you be more empathetic to your fellow workman? Can
If we did, I've seen a couple of organizations that are looking into mental peace, not mental peace, Hinduism or it's more like meditation, breathing. And also, like you said about empathetic and sympathy.
So that's the problem. So meditation per se again is a Hindu practice or it's a Buddhist practice globally done. I don't know, Saudi Arabia. Yes.
So, but Europe, I've seen a couple of
Europe is fine. Europe they will do anything. Europe and the United States. Yeah. Many Americans also believe in karma and so on. So it's a very common thing today for them to talk about karma. They talk about karma more than Indians do. In fact. We have internalized it. Yeah. So
mental balance.
yeah, I think you're right. I think spiritualism is more about mindfulness and can you introspect? Can you become a better person? Can you sort of be more kind? Are you empathetic to your fellow? So these say you go to an ultra. How does the Indian Army guy? There's a guy in the ASC center. I used to meet him often, and he was the ADC to the Lieutenant General there. In this sense, we used to do a lot of programs. And somebody told me, the general told me that this guy has got the Veer Chakra for Kargil. So I asked him, why do you get the Veer Chakra? Can you come and talk to our students? So he said, yeah, I can't talk. I'm a soldier. I said, why did you get it? So he said, I led a charge into a Pakistani bunker and with my knife, I killed about 6 Pakistanis. So I should have asked him, weren't you empathetic to them? Where was your sense of empathy at that point in time? So these are tricky questions actually. Yeah. How do you tell a person empathetically you're fired, come, you won't please don't come? Difficult for me to understand. Yeah. But I think mindfulness is good. What really makes us think? What is it that prevents me from burning out? What is my definition of, like our friend there, work-life balance? Yeah. People ask me actually, isn't your wife bothered that you come here and teach on a Saturday? And it's just spending time at home. It doesn't bother me actually. I enjoy the teaching part. And that's why I said, for me, work-life balance is doing what I enjoy, right? For somebody, it might be spending more time at home with their family and so on and so forth. So, these are developing fields. And there's a guy called Seligman. You can look him up. Seligman does a lot of, mindfulness exercise. How do you sort of sit quietly and introspect upon what really makes you tick? What makes you tick? Falling asleep. Okay. So what drives you?
At this time, tea might help. Let me try.
So in the long term, what drives you?
Taking new challenge.
Taking new challenges? Okay. Yeah, okay. So that's his point of view, taking new challenges and so on and so forth. But please try to think about it. Reflect for some time. And so I get this question, and I get it mostly from the fresh MBA guys. Why did you leave a glamorous job as captain and you turned up here and then you were a poorly paid professor? And it's a very interesting question, isn't it? And it reflects their point of view, their mindset, and they ask it with genuine curiosity. And it's very interesting. And for me, just to digress, I was playing cricket with my son. I was on leave, and I was playing cricket with my son opposite our house. And my neighbor came and said, Nagaraj, when are you going back on board? And I said, maybe 10 days, 15 days. He said, don't you get bored, to keep going away from home so regularly? And I got angry actually. I told him that I stopped playing cricket, much to the annoyance of my little son. And I said, look, it's a great job. I'm captain. I can do pretty much what I want on board. I got enormous authority. I get well paid. I go and see several countries. But I knew all these were not true. I was just telling him to impress him. And I knew that I was not telling the truth. I had had enough. There was no gas in the tank cleaning. Yeah. And that I think that was the time I decided to have had enough of this profession and I must reinvent myself and think. I was lucky. Yeah. Do something different. And so there's a different career which developed. So but I was lucky. But then several of you will have to be spiritually more inclined in thinking about what drives you, and organizations must also be spiritually more inclined in thinking what drives them. And why should they be spiritually more inclined? That is the important. Talking about spirituality, why do you think organizations should be spiritually more?
In the society, we should also think about.
Very good. So organizations for too long have been behaving as if they are not part of society. So, for example, can you go and delude resources so rapidly that you destroy something for several generations? Yeah. So there was people protest against say chopping off of trees or damaging coral reefs. They must be looked at carefully whether there's some truth in them or not. Or you're denuding groundwater of several cities to make a colored sugary water that all of you drink called Coca-Cola, Pepsi, or something like that, which you drill and get groundwater out, so on and so forth. So organizations are being made. So, for example, a good example is in United States, you've not done corporate finance, right? Marketing. So sorry, accounting. You've done some amount of accounting. So just think about it. When you're doing a balance sheet, you're balancing a balance sheet. Precursor is the profit and loss account, right? Now, suppose we have to monetize assets. So for our school, I monetize the building, I monetize our professors, I monetize our intellectual property, the goodwill we have, and so on and so on. But then somebody comes and says, hello, you are running classes on weekends, and you're running this AC. What about your carbon footprint? Yeah, you are generating some amount of, you're contributing to global warming. So how about us monetizing the carbon footprint that you create and bring it onto your profit and loss? I can tell you several major airlines, including Lufthansa, British Air, will slip into the red if they monetize their carbon. And today, governments are asking companies and threatening them, saying that we are going to monetize this school and bring it onto your books. If you don't come up with strategies to mitigate several of these societal issues, what's the problem with global warming? What do you think is going to happen? Suppose let global warming happen. What will happen?
It is built on the whole.
Let it melt. What's the problem? What is the immediate problem? How will Hanuman Nari here be affected? Or Captain Nagaraj be affected?
Current situation is not be affected, but for the coming generation.
Exactly. What do you think is going to happen? Skin cancer,
Environment.
Burning of resources, natural resources.
that you can get if you go around the United States without cleaning. You can now itself get it. You have to-
Yeah.
We are blessed with it. But what is the problem? What is the immediate outcome? Species might disappear like what?
Just like introducing 5G solution. It's not of words, you couldn't survive this 5G spectrum waves, which lots of person died. And rise of water level global.
Water. Suppose the water level, suppose the water level rises by say 5 inches. What will,
Lot of land masses.
like what? Give me an example. Half of Bangladesh will disappear. And if half of Bangladesh disappears, where do you think those guys are going to go? That's why you should be worried about global, they'll go underwater.
They won't have any space left.
We have India next door.
So that is why we are.
Next way we are get more jobs.
So, I'm not talking about the political part of it, but the fact of the matter is that, so there was this company which actually asked us to do a study. We did a nice study for this organization. It said that if we relocate our plants from China to Vietnam, what are the chances of this? What is the long-term prospect of this organization in terms of global warming? Naturally, we did a lot of research, and I have some experience in that area with ocean engineering. And not very far from Hanoi, they expect it to be submerged in the next about 20 years. If we continue at the rate at which we are continuing with global warming. And so half of Vietnam will be submerged. And you've had cases, like you go to say Gujarat and you go to Bet Dwarka, you can see a submerged city there. Whether it was Krishna's old capital or not, I don't know. But there is a submerged, very much there. Gone there several times. Yeah, you can see. So global warming is an issue which do you think organizations should be concerned about?
Yes.
So that is the spirituality part of it, maybe, and show how national culture can affect the way of what is national culture? How is national culture different from, say, national culture different from, say, organization? What's the difference? What are some different parameters
national culture. It's about how people live in the.
So what is culture exactly? Say, when you talk about national culture, what defines a nation's culture? Suppose you say, how are we different from the Americans in terms of culture? What is your answer? We have a good culture, they have a bad culture. We drink less than them. We divorce less than them. Is that your answer? We respect elders, okay?
Our customs and traditions are different, celebrations are different, what they actually.
Those are artifacts. So for example, Jyotsna doesn't have a bindi. So do I assume that Jyotsna is a Christian or Muslim? No. No. That's the problem. So you're talking about artifacts. You're talking about, so for example, if our friend here, Manjuna, Akshay calls himself General Akshay. Should I assume he's part of the army? There's a fellow in Tamil Nadu, one actor who calls himself Captain, right? Vijay, was he in the Indian Armed Forces? So these are, he wasn't. These are artifacts. These are artifacts which are the outermost layer of a. So, for example, if one day Sneha, right? Sneha today might be in jeans. Should I assume she's an ultra modern girl? Tomorrow she comes in a sari, so suddenly she's become conservative. These are problems that occur in the periphery, where we make judgments based on appearance and say this person is conservative, this person has this culture, he is conservative, he is several other things happen. We attribute religious signs to them and so on and so forth. You have to look much deeper. You have to look, so culture comes from the shared experiences of our ancestors. What have our ancestors gone through? And for example, why do Hindus respect the cow? Why? The simple answer is because our ancestors did.
Because our Bhagwan and the Kamadenu and all.
Let's not go into the simple answer is that and they passed it on to you, generation to generation, they passed it on. That is how culture actually transmits itself. You must be very clear that countries have got different. So, for example, do we have a more similar culture to Pakistan than to the United States? Yes, we and the Pakistanis are quite not exactly similar, but we are pretty similar as compared to say. Right. What brings us back to the original question? How are we different from the Americans? Ethnicity, yes, of course. The ethnic part of it is we are different. Yes, but culturally, how we
behave you because they're more aggressive and direct. I think they're more
I don't see if I see the menu roads, I think people are less fine.
see actually there is tendency European America the most open and honest than Indian culture, but of course it's changing. It's very, but there is a
They're more honest. That's why the British booted India. 7 trillion pounds and honest. So that is the problem. So if I ask you to compare two countries, you will come up with, but there are some frameworks. For example, you can note down this, it's called the Hofstede model. HOFSTEDE. Gerd Hofstede is a Dutch social scientist, and he came up with this beautiful model. And it talks about, so one of the points that Hofstede talks about is power distance. What is power distance? So, for example, if I ask Saroja, right? Saroja, do you respect your father? So, if I ask an American, do you respect your father? Maybe. Let me think about it. Yeah, what's the difference here? You have better culture. So in India, so for example, several years back, more than what, 15 years back, I was teaching a class of Americans. And when they were leaving the class, they said, Professor, can we do a high five? Because we liked the class. We already did. So I asked when they had left, I asked my other students, you guys never do high five with me. And they said, so we can't think about it. The professor. Yeah. So that is power distance. So in India, we are taught to believe that people who are older, who are in positions of authority, who actually, look very confident and well educated and have more degrees to their name, are to be respected more than. And that's why you will respect a professor who's talking absolute nonsense. But you will go after somebody on the roadside who may be talking a lot of sense. Yeah? So power distance is one defining factor between the culture. So the Americans have a low power distance. They say we will respect you if you show us why we should respect you. Till then I am not good. Till then you are equal to me. Only when you clearly establish why I should be respecting you, then I will. It's not as automatic as in India. Any other cultural difference like that you can come up. So Gert Hofstede actually studied several hundreds of thousands of people across several countries and came up with this fascinating model. If you should all look at it. Yeah.
One story I heard, my boss says actually, he had been to America. His close friend was staying in America. Then he went to his home. Then he was introducing a kid, small 4-5 years girl. And that guy said that, see, look, uncle, say hi to uncle. And that girl said, no, I will not say uncle. Because he is not uncle, he is not my relative, he is not my uncle. So how can I say uncle? That is again the culture of that.
Yes. True. Here, the kid will say uncle because your tears might be repeated later on. Yeah.
Culture is, I wondered because the culture is how it can be so fun even small kids also.
So what else? What do you think? Can you come up with some other point? So another aspect that Hofstede talked about is what is called as individuality versus collectivism. So are we an individualistic people or are we collective? That is, we do things as groups and teams, we're closely knit and so on. What do you think Indian? They're very individualistic. Yeah. And probably it is only a sense of poverty that brought us together. Many people together. But as you see, as India gets more prosperous, you will find several people charting their own course. Yeah, several people would like to do things by themselves, right? And not necessarily any collective society you can think about. Truly collective society. Or more collective, more closer to each other. Pakistanis are more collective. Then the Arabs are more collective. Some of the most collective people are Japanese. Yeah, the Chinese are more Indian. So India has something common with say, the United States, England, and so on and so forth in terms of being more individuals. Yeah, so we seem to thrive as so national culture can actually be delineated. Why is it important to understand a national culture?
Because wherever we go, we have to behave
Absolutely. Suppose you are transferred for a job to
another country.
you go to suppose you go from here now. Where are you from? From Belgavi district, you got transferred. Suddenly you went and landed in Australia on Bondi Beach in Sydney. It's a very pretty beach, right? With pretty people. What do you think is going to be your case? It should stop. Yeah, and the Australians are a little puzzled as to why Indian men would turn up, keep staring at your other women. But the fact of the matter is that these are issues. So if you understand, I wrote a case actually a few years back which I presented at IIM in Lucknow. Fundamentally, the case was as follows: an Indian company buys an Australian subsidiary, and the Australian subsidiary has a great event because they have got an order, and everybody they ordered a truckload of beer, but the Indian company has a strict no alcohol on campus policy. So this is a clash. Australia is very common to drink beer in Friday evening, about 2 o'clock, the bar opens and people are pretty sozzled by about 4:30, and then they go home for the weekend. It is accepted. It's a cultural value to drink beer while watching cricket matches and so on and so forth, and even in organizations. So should we be concerned about it? Suppose you are the Indian CEO in Australia, should you be concerned about it? Should you do something different?
Should buy beer, sir.
You buy beer. You also drink.
We should not, because it represents their culture in this country. Because in our organization, we have every second week we have bar open after Fridays. And sometimes even in certain days, even we do it in. It's cultural because it's a Danish company. It doesn't mean we exactly have to.
So in India, you open the bar.
Yes, in some few occasions.
So these are tricky questions when you compare countries. So when ships are launched, generally when you go to the west, in a ship, right? Big ships are launched, and one of the ceremonies is they break open a bottle of champagne, and that is cracked on the hull of the ship. And then the ship is launched because the ship is a lady, and so the lady chief guest will come and break that. She launches the ship. So in India, they were wondering what to do. How do you bring some champagne? So they replace the champagne with the coconut. If you go and now look at ships, they will take one coconut and on the hull of the ship, and it is. What is that? So guys online, any questions? I had a meeting early in the morning.
No, sir.
Okay. So all of you finished case study, right? That was the quality of pre-book.
You want to take one example. You are telling an example of that joint IT, mid IT company, that talent, director, that employees.
So it was very strange because I joined, and then the first thing is the CEO called me next day morning and said, "You spy on these people." I said, "Hello, I'm not a police guy or what Sherlock Holmes or something like that. I can't spy on these people. I do an HR job." No, that's the part of the job you have to spy on these. Then I found that they were spying on me. So I had to go to this horrible night field every day, and from one country, second stage, and I got my board. My wife, I was becoming more and more angry, and my wife told me that, "Look, why don't you actually go back to the Netherlands?" By myself, and please leave this job. So it didn't work, and those guys were very annoying. I won't mention it. Change, man, change. Leadership. So, yeah. So I think you got a pretty good hang of culture. I only want you to go just eat something. Sure, sir. Just open this. No, not you, just Google search. Sure. United States America. India. Okay, so I've actually drawn up this Hofstadter comparison. I think it's going to be shared. You can share, sir. Oh. Not coming. Yes. Share the desktop. Yep. Yeah, I pulled up Hofstadter's country comparisons, and I'm comparing China, India, Japan, and you can see the variation. And that is why it becomes very tricky when you go from one country to. So, for example, if you look at power distance, China is at 80, very high power distance, and we are 77, not too far from them. 54 is Japan, and 40 is the United States. Yeah, so they really don't care what position you carry, as unless you show them exactly why they have to. Yeah. If you look at individualism, we have got China at 20, it's a collective country, I told you. 48 is India, 46 is Japan, and 91, the individuality is the United States. Very, very individualistic. They don't believe in living in. That's why Americans, every time Americans, you go and talk to them, they talk about teamwork, group work. Why? Because they are by nature and individualistic. Yeah. Uncertainty avoidance is how much of risk-taking appetite you have. You know, so if you look at it again here, uncertainty avoidance, Japan is very high. They avoid risk. They are not great risk takers, and the United States, other countries are pretty close. Long-term orientation. Long-term orientation. Again, Indians are very short-term. And intelligence is, Indians score very well in intelligence. That is, are you ready to splurge, or are you willing to look at the long term benefit instead of the short term? And the US really is a very indulgent country at 68, the last one. Yeah, as compared to say China, India, and Japan. Of course, the richer you are, the more indulgent you can. Go back to this. So please go and look at Hofstadter's model. So, yeah, good. Thank you. So, I put deliberately leadership and organizational change because, most leaders fail because they're not able to manage. Leadership is again something that is, it's very much talked about, but nobody seems to understand it fully. And one of the reasons why, one of the reasons why many leaders fail is because their inability to manage. How do we wrestle with change? And why is that? Why is change so difficult to manage?
Resistance to change.
Because humans have always resisted change. And they don't sort of change easily. Why? Because changing anything comes in association with failure. And there's a good chance that you might fail. So just think about it. Now, you have learned typewriter. Ace in, and I take you out of that comfort zone and say, now you have to go and operate a computer. Will you like it? Take certain amount of courage and take some amount of. So most humans, so there are two things that humans actually have a problem with. One is inability to come out of a comfort zone. You're comfortable. And the other one is what I talked the other day, about the dog experiment, about learned helplessness. That is, you know you are getting beaten, but you get used to it and you want to continue to get beaten because you don't want to change. And you have an apprehension that if you do something new, that you will fail. And this is that's why we get stuck in, and we feel trapped. Yeah. Very difficult feeling, right? You feel trapped. I don't have an outlet. I can't do anything else. Anybody feels like that? You're trapped in something. How do I get out of the situation? And how do I do something? So I really, when I gave up my job in the Netherlands, which was a pretty good job, I was, I think, hitting about roughly upwards of 4 lakhs a month. This I'm talking about 2006. A lot of money. And then when I came here and I went and approached the college, and that guy said, "What was your last month's salary?" But I had an interesting experience. I applied to Shoppers Stop, and I saw an advertisement that the salary was 3 lakhs. I said, not bad. I shared many of them, so I applied to Shoppers Stop, and I got a call. They wanted a branch manager. So conversation went well, and they said, "What do you do?" I said, "I'm a captain." And I said, "3 lakhs, pretty decent salary, I must." He said, yeah, 3 lakhs per year. That actually woke me up a little bit. And so then I came and approached, this IT company happened, which I was better paid. Then I came and applied to a college, and the director said, "What was your last drawn salary?" So I told him, and he almost I fell off the chair. So he said, no, we can't pay this. I said, "What can you pay?" He said, "We can pay you 24,500. And came home and told my wife that 24,500 is going to be my new salary. She said, "No problem, we'll make it work." And I really, look back at it and say, what a nice support system I have. He told me something else also. He said, "You will give your salaries to 24,500, but you can make money on the side. You can take from students and so on and so forth," which I found very amusing actually. He's a very nice, gentle man with a good PhD from famous JNU. Yeah? And he said it all sincerely. "Look, it's okay, you can take some money here. Whenever you sign something, you can ask them to pay you." That is how you increase your money income. But this is what we pay you. Work there for some time, shift it. And of course, the rest is history. But Yeah, it's been a fabulous career. So, yeah, I'll skip the leadership part. I put it there because. So what are some of the forces of change? Why are we forced to change? Why do you change? Do people change automatically? All sensible people should. But we are not sensible, right? I mean, we are comfortable with what we are doing. We are sort of dropped into a nice comfort zone. We don't want to do new things. It takes much energy and effort. We're afraid we'll fail. But what forces us to change?
Internal and external. Sometimes internal forces, which is our interest and our future thinking. And external, like maybe company force me to learn something, or maybe sometimes I have to do something.
So sometimes your company says, look here, if you can do this, good, otherwise go and find another job. And a good example is what happened to the shipping industry in 2000 and in 2001, yeah, where 9/11 happened, yeah, and many people did not notice was that our friend Osama bin Laden, uh, after that whole Twin Tower thingy happened, he made one statement very quietly. He said the next attack on the United States is going to be by sea. He said this time we've hit them by land, by the air. Next time we are going to hit them by sea. And the Americans really panicked. And they pushed through a series of ship security resolutions to the United Nations in what is called as the International Maritime Organization. So the cost of security on ships suddenly shot up, skyrocketed, the right word. And many small ship owners could not absorb those costs, right? And they did not have the wherewithal to change, which was a externally driven radical change process, which happened suddenly. So many of them cut shop and went. You can also have incremental changes, slow changes where companies allow you to. So, for example, when my organization in the Netherlands, where I was working, they acquired a much larger company. They said we'll do a 6-year period timeline in which both companies adjust to each other's slow incremental change. Lakshmi Mittal, when we took over this porous site, one of those. He said, 1 year I'll give you to learn English. Otherwise, after that, you are fine. That is again rapid change. So, nature of the workforce, more cultural diversity. If you have, and that's why the army asks you. Army will ask you, did your parents belong to the, because they don't want all sorts of characters coming in and then trying to change the armed forces. Diversity doesn't work really well in the Indian army because they don't want people with radical ideas and thoughts to come in and try to influence. Do you think it's the right approach? Or people should be allowed to sort of speak their mind. What do you guys think? Should the Indian Army be more democratic? Interesting debate. It's a very interesting, you may not find it on, it's a very interesting story about 1970s. There was a large Indian ship called INS Mysore. Have I told you the story? Because the INS Mysore used to be stationed in Bombay. Yeah. And Mysore sailed out on a exercise, went out into the Arabian Sea, and it carried more than 1,000 people. For the destroyer, for that size of a ship, more than 1,000 people is you're teeming with people. And one set of guys, 4 set of people, decided to protest. And what did they protest about? They protested about the quality of living conditions and food. And they refused to, they did a dharna, they did a strike. They said, we will not work, we will all sit on the deck. So the junior officer went and tried to reason, then the XO went and tried to reason with them, then the captain went and tried to reason with them, they wouldn't budge, and they said that we want better. So the captain radioed naval headquarters in Bombay, and they said, come back. So they came back, another 1,200 people were waiting on the captain downwards to the bathroom cleaner. Everybody went, these 1,200 came out, those 1,200 went on board, this 1,200 came out, were taken into a camp, they were questioned. So 6 ringleaders, so-called ringleaders were isolated and sent on leave. They said, go on leave, go on leave, and they disappeared. So because they have signed off and they have left the Navy, so the families were told they have gone on leave, we don't know where they are. But these people never reached home. And that message went down the Navy very, very strongly. That we believe in democracy, we don't practice it. Nice statement. We believe in democracy, but not necessarily because that is their culture. You can't have people turning up and saying that, no, I will not fire. He is a good enemy. I want to be spiritual protection high, and I will not attack him. Certainly you have we'll have it in this Bollywood movie. Suddenly you kind of develop some affinity for them. Anyway, technology, all of you know, is the digitization of the world is occurring. And I don't know when I've gone to a bank class. If Zoom was not there and we did not have it, most we would have folded up during Corona. Several colleges folded up. We had already executive education, we knew about this technology, so we continued. But technology has changed the world the way we live. Yeah, and fundamentally the digitization, also the new AI platforms that are coming in and what they can do or what they cannot do. And I was curious actually. I was in 2019, I think I was flying back from San Francisco to India, and then suddenly I got a message saying that your flight has been cancelled. So I tried to quarrel with that voice, and then that was actually a robot. So it was a bot or whatever. So there was no point in trying to negotiate with that. Robot. So today the world is changing and it brings about change. Economic shocks. You think are we close to an economic shock now? Yeah. Is the music slowing? So
But compared to other Asian countries this year, the percentage of high grade.
on what base? No. So suppose you are given say 2 teaspoonfuls or something, and then they decide to give you 100% oil. It becomes 4 teaspoonfuls. And somebody is already getting 15 teaspoons and they get 10%. Who's better off? So is it like that or
They took the metrics like weighted it down for Japan, China, India.
it is a weighted?
It was a weighted one. That is a big
Okay, economic shocks, competition. Does competition force you to change? Yes. Yeah. Social trends, increased environmental awareness, like we talked about, liberalization of attitudes towards gay, lesbian, transgender employees. So, if you have a gay person sitting next to you, say 20 years, I think Hanuman Dari said is uncomfortable, right? That's that. Gay person sitting next to you. It says so, no? Yes, sir. So, can you say I don't want this person sitting next to me?
I cannot say legally, but it is again inside me that I may feel, but I cannot express it.
Yeah, but then from the legal point of view, you can't. You cannot say. So, suppose there are 2 people up for promotion, and one of them is a gay person. Will you deny them the promotion? Better be careful. What are your inner feelings tell you?
Not reject the promotion.
No, not you. In promoting that person.
Who will you come?
In finally, should not be consideration for.
But
Those things should not be considerative at all.
you're not human, right?
So many NGOs,
It's a part of the plan.
now many MNCs are promoting this activities. They want more people on leadership position. If there are 5 people, who they want female.
There's a case going on, right? One of the a gay judge has been promoted to the Supreme Court. And the government, central government is very unhappy because this guy is in a relationship with a Swedish national. And the government and the research and analysis wing, Indian intelligence, and said this is a danger. What he might do. So this is sensitive information that we need to present on the court, but the Supreme Court collegium seems to feel that it is on par.
I think that's a cultural difference we got in. Maybe 5 years or 10 years before, people are being not ready to completely accept.
But
we
the
don't agree
agencies
with it.
still can keep auto check on this.
So let me make it more controversial. Okay, let me draw an extreme. Suppose you have a senior military officer marrying a Pakistani woman. They met in Dubai, fell in love, and they're now married. How do you think the armed forces should react?
If it is that limited case,
So that's why it is extreme controversial. You're right. Any of those kind of guys who want to marry a non-Indian national has to take clearance from the government of India. Only then it can. And then also it puts you under a shadow.
Because lot of things gets related to honey trap and
This may not be honey trapping. There might be a general sense of, this might be general romance. This might be general, about marriage.
yes.
Okay, let's take a break. We'll come back in one minute. Yeah.
but the husband cannot say his wife, you honey, you trap me.
You're correct. Ma'am.
टूथसी से फिक्स करना दांतों का गैप
is as easy as घर बैठे ordering from a food app.
टूथसी इनविजिबल टीथ अलाइनर्स फिक्स दांतों का गैप इजी टू बुक इजी टू यूज एंड इजी ऑन द पॉकेट
अब स्माइल फिक्स करना
है इजी पीजी टूथसी डाउनलोड द मीको ऐप एंड बुक योर स्कैन नाउ
Yeah, I can't really hear what you're saying. Very small, it's coming, you know. The page is very big, but it's like a 50 paisa coin. So all people who got very little marks in the first assignment, I think are 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. Time. Fine. That is normal after break. No, I want the previous. So which one? That one. Play that one. So this is the great General George Patton. What kind of culture do you think he would have set? What was his cultural ethos? What do you think? How his team would have had what kind of culture? Never spared, but what kind of general culture? How do you think he would have treated his people? What was the main thing that drove the culture in his, say, regiment? No mercy. But then he was, yeah, we'll look at another case. Yes. So later on, the next, okay, likable. Would you have liked to work with somebody like that? Yeah, everybody wanted to serve with General George Patton. Nobody liked him because he took the least casualties in war. And he won everything that he fought. Now, which brings us to the larger question of, and his culture was very simple. We win everything. There was no question of failure or losing. So several people said different kinds of cultures. The point I was trying to make is that it evolves from the very top, right? And others, something which is important to remember. Okay, again, we're talking about national culture. So this is very interesting. So we'll go back. So this is about an American in Japan, and this is from a movie called The Last Samurai. Very interesting. And I want you to reflect upon it and tell me what do you think about it.
3まで数えるから。じーっとして。1、2、3。いい。2だよ。今時上下着てる御人がいるとはな。
Yes, it is.
いつまでちょんまげをしておるのだ。
And quite a proud one from the looks of him.
かもあの日本差し。どうした。それは竹光か。
Oh dear, this is bad. He's expecting them to show deference.
貴様らそれでも日本人か。お前らの時代終わったんだよ。Oh my God.
thing happened there exactly. Two cultures coming together. Japanese expect, they have very much a class system like India has got. And people expect to show respect, high power distance. And when somebody did not show that samurai warrior respect, what do? Then the movie very interesting because it brings a sharp focus into Japanese culture of that time and American culture. How these two sort of sit uneasily with each other. Yeah? So national cultures are very interesting. Not this one, the other one. I think it's
So which one? This one, no?
I think it's into takeoff, the takeoff part.
This one.
It comes.
No, sir, on this one.
Okay, leave it, doesn't matter. We go back to the PPT.
PPT. This one.
Thanks. All right, so we were talking about forces of change. Thank you. Talking about forces of change, and we're talking about major workforce, technology, economic shocks, competition, how competition drives change, social trends, and of course, world politics. Tell me an instance where world politics has caused change. Political situation, what kind of change?
One is, we can see example of Russia and the war between Russia and Ukraine. So it has caused a lot of economic crisis.
Yeah, right. Okay. What else? Absolutely. So you have supply chain management issues,
Yeah.
you have logistic issues, you have petroleum prices rising in parts of the world. You have petroleum prices dropping in India because we are getting cheap Russian oil. And then we are refining it and sending it back to US and Europe. So we're having a jolly good time actually. Yeah. So these are changed equations. But you can have also massive changes because like I mentioned 9/11. Yeah, America got hit. So they changed several things. Global warming is bringing about change again. And if you look at the early 1970s, who were the leading automobile makers? Did I mention this? The leading automobile makers in the 60s and 70s, early 70s. Generally, the Americans. Yeah, the Americans ruled the automobile space because the Germans made good cars. The Japanese were not. The Japanese were just coming in with their so-called fuel efficient cars. It didn't make a difference because oil prices were very cheap, low. And a car say gave 1 liter gave about 4 kilometers or say 2.5 miles in the United States. You're quite happy. Today my Honda gives me about 15 to 16 on good days kilometers to the liter. Just think about it. If it gave you about 3 kilometers to the liter, it was very, very inefficient. And then two things happened. One is our friends Pakistan were broken into two in 1971. And soon the Arabs fought a disastrous war with the Israelis. You had the 6-day war where several Arab countries attacked Israel, but were received a very, very sound thrashing. And in fact, the Arab countries lost a bit of territory. They lost what is called the Golan Heights and the Gaza Strip. So it was a very humiliating defeat, and they blamed the West and Europe for that. They were ill prepared for that war. They launched a war against Israel, thinking they will win, and they didn't. So the reciprocated by raising crude oil prices. And they said, this is how we will take revenge upon. So suddenly, oil prices went up all across the world. And the cars that were just about managing in the United States, giving about 2 kilometers to a liter or 3 kilometers to a liter, suddenly became very, very inefficient. And it killed an entire automobile industry. It destroyed the American automobile industry. The Japanese were waiting for such an opportunity, and they had much more fuel efficient cars. They just took over the market, and the rest is history. Now we've got EV. Of course, the Americans again are market leaders in electric vehicles. You've got Tesla and so many things. Chinese say they're doing some. We should see how it goes. So you can also have political forces. For example, Brexit, England, the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. What implications does it have for the rest of Europe? Yeah, or the formation of the European Union. What is one absolutely visible thing that happened because of the formation of the European Union? Something that is very visible.
They are trade barriers, they are breaking the trade barriers.
Right. So trade became much more
Easier.
simple. Also, what happened was it allowed migration of people from one country to another country, and to allow people from moving, say, from Eastern Europe to Western Europe very easily, and so on and so forth. And many people say that was one of the reasons why the UK got out of the European Union, because they couldn't handle the migration. But they couldn't handle the number of people flowing into their country from the rest of Europe. So change can also be very, very political. For example, India was forced to liberalize in 1991 because we ran out of foreign exchange reserves. A condition that Pakistan finds itself now. They don't have any foreign exchange reserves. Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, all these countries are struggling where India was in 1991, and we didn't have a choice. The IMF told us that if you want a loan, you will have to start liberalizing and your economy and allow foreign countries to come in and so on and so forth. And of course, that is why all of you work in air conditioning cubicles, rather than working in a manufacturing. Yeah. So the forces of change are important. So why do organizations need to change? Because of two reasons. One, either there are opportunity gaps. That is, there is an opportunity, but we're not able to take advantage of that
By changing.
opportunity. So you change, you make necessary changes, and then you reach out to. So, for example, if I say this program will be only in class and will not be broadcast online, do you think my admissions will drop? An opportunity cost. Yeah. So opportunity gaps are always there, and as there are changes in society, in technology, in customer needs, in political forces, and so on, you will have. So what gave rise to, say, Uber? So the guy who founded Uber found one day that he couldn't get a cab in New York. And he said, this is nonsense. So I must have a system which is better than it. So there was an opportunity. Or the Airbnb guy couldn't get a hotel room in a busy, say music season or somewhere in California, Los Angeles, whatever. Yeah. So these are opportunity gaps, and then performance gaps. Are there gaps in your? Why have you joined this executive MBA program?
Finance or knowledge?
Because you see a performance gap. You feel that once you get this degree, your performance will hopefully improve. So you see a performance gap and you're willing to do something about it. Yeah. So opportunity gaps and performance gaps. And why is it so difficult? Change is intensely personal, and there are emotions involved, fear of failure, and so on. And it's like a company is undergoing 5 medical procedures at the same time. One person is in charge of root canal, someone else is getting the broken foot, other person is working with the displaced. So there is a doctor who does, several doctors who do several operations on the individual, change management processes in a company. And doctors are operating on so many things. All of them are successful, but the patient dies because they can't bring it together as a whole. Yeah. So each operation is success for the patient lies out. So it's pretty common. I have a classmate of mine who's in hospital. Unfortunately, he took to drinking and he's in hospital because of a broken hip. And they don't have much hope because he's got several other problems. Kidneys are failing, the liver has gone because of the drink, the lungs are bad, and so on. So there's several complications. Then bringing changes is like that. So many things are happening at the same time that if they are not orchestrated or not managed properly, the whole thing may collapse. Yeah. So when you look at change, design, and implementation, you have to sort out certain things. It's called sort. That is scope, origin, rollout, and so, for example, do you want to start it now, or you want to start it later? You want to roll it out in small measures or large measures. What is the origin? Is it you want to bring about change in the top, or you want to bring about change in the bottom? And what is the size of change you want to bring about actually? Do you want to bring about small changes, or you want to bring about wholesale? Like the Indian government did 1991, they just brought in wholesale change. The license Raj disappeared. Yeah. So scope is incremental or radical. You can make small changes or you can make radical changes. What's the problem with radical change? You may lose control. You may totally lose control about what is incremental changes. It may not really make much of a difference. It's slow. Origin is bottom up or where does change occur bottom up? Any scenario you can think of where change occurred from the bottom. Normally change, if you look at your companies, where does change come from? Where does it occur from the bottom?
When there is not much belief in the system.
Very good, excellent. When there is not much belief in, what are those called? What? Tell me of a situation where change happens bottom up. Any instances that you know? So generally you have bottom-up change in revolutions. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Indian independence movement, where all these are driven generally from the mass movements are, we have not seen one like that in India again. You have random fellows like the Naxalites and all trying something, but it's very, very rare. So drastic, radical change occurs from the bottom, where they just sweep out the old regime or the old processes and bring in new systems. So you can look at the Bushman congruence model. So for example, so rollout is localized or system wide. Do you want to do a pilot? Do you want to bring about change in a small unit, or you want to sort of do it for the entire system? And then again, your system can go into Shabji, calling this thing can leave that. No good. I won't feel bad about it. I've seen many like. Yeah, okay. So you can be localized or you can have systemized change. And then systemized change can actually again go out of control. It's not monitored carefully, and timing slow or fast. And if you come to this model now, you can take a 2x2 matrix between origin and scope, and you can look at radical change which is occurring from the bottom is the change, or when it is top down but it is radical, like what happened to the government of India in 1991, it is transformation. You can have tactical change when it is top down and it is tactical, slowly, you will make the slow changes. Or evolutionary change, how human beings have been evolving for the last hundreds of thousands of years. You know, if you believe in the Darwinian theory of evolution and that we actually evolved over several hundred of rather than we were born like this or we descended from Mars or wherever. Then the change has been so small, so small that it is difficult to even notice. So you might be young at heart, but then if you one day look in the mirror and see that you actually look like an old man. Because that is evolutionary. Yeah. Okay, there's something called as a Cotter's change model, which you should know. And John Cotter came up with this change model. He said that how do you bring about change in an organization? And he said, first of all, you have to create a sense of urgency. So what did the Indian government do in 1991? First, they told everybody, we run out of forex. We run out of forex reserves. We don't have money to buy anything at all. And we're not willing to beg from other countries. So we need to bring. So many organizations do this. So if you question why are they laying off people, they'll say recession is coming. They create a sense of urgency and they spread this message. Then they build a guiding team. How do we build a guide? People who will guide this change process, get the right vision for the change to occur. So this is creating a climate for change. You must create a climate for change, and then you engage and enable the entire organization, that is communicate or buy-in. You communicate this to different people and say, look, we need to change, so I need your support on this. Empower action. So allow people, what do you mean empower action? So suppose I am driving change in my department and we have Krishna here who's an argumentative to the young lady and says, I don't want to follow you. So am I empowered to do anything? So organizations say, try to reason, and then what do? Show the doors. Yeah. So people are empowered in many ways to drive. Like what happened is that INS Mysore. Their Navy is empowered by the government to take appropriate action to deal with, in their words, troublemakers. Yeah. So you empower people and then you create short-term wins. You tell people that we have won in what wins we have in the short term. Yeah. And you don't give up. And eventually you have to make it. So resilience is very important. So this is Cotter's change model. Let me tell you that most change initiative processes fail somewhere. They don't reach the level of success that was envisaged in their first. Yeah. Okay, folks, I'm going to stop there. It's been a long journey. Any questions? First time? Any questions that anybody has got?
Sir, I have a question. You said before we join the organization, we should understand the culture. How do we understand the culture?
You can talk to other people.
And apart from going on translation.
You can talk to other people in that organization. You can browse the net. You will get indications. Generally, by and large, we have an idea about what is the organization or Infosys or HP or Google. So you can it's a good thing to find out and see whether it's sort of is aligned with your own value systems.
Can we define ethics in one line like doing right with no?
So the interesting question, what's the name? Interesting question is ethics at what price? So, will you steal my tab if I leave it here? Unlike, yeah. Suppose I told you that, the CCTV cameras are not working. And somebody outside offered you 25,000. Will you steal it? Answer right. So what did I do now? I changed the context. So the ethics is always related to context. So, several, say, we don't understand the horrors of the Second World War or what happened in concentration camps. So, several imprisoned inmates in concentration camps were used as sex slaves by the German guards. Now, do you think they were unethical? By submitting neatly, do you think they were unethical? What's your point of view? What do you think? Yeah, so it's a question of again your own value system and judgment. But for them, survival was the most important thing. If I survive, it is more important than thinking about ethics. So if you have nothing to eat, will you steal from that time? He has got some food. So then the context becomes very important. And there is nothing like basic ethics. So ethics as defined by organizations is where everything is normal and everybody has equal opportunity. Will you do the right thing? That also there are some unethical. So sorry, I can't define it. Just to get that cheap.
So not related to this, but do you think recession coming to India?
But, 100%. So they're just reacting to the coming recession. Recession, I don't think is upon us yet. On the way. The companies are tightening the belt. Because if large companies, I think even Google has announced that they're going to lay off 10,000. Microsoft has laid off. Amazon has laid off. Twitter has laid off. Facebook has laid off. So who's left?
So it's because the investors are taking their money out because of this big companies are laying.
The layoffs can happen for several reasons. One being also that they overexpanded. You expanded capacity beyond a certain point, and then there is not enough of business.
But sir, it cannot happen to all these companies. See, one company can make a mistake of expanding so much without
All of them expand.
paying that much, fund in your account, but everybody is doing the same. So at times I feel like there are good investors in the market who are taking their money out. That's a wave, and others also follow the same. Am I right?
Yeah, investors take out their money when they feel that their same invested is not doesn't make sense anymore. Why should I stay invested with you if you are not giving me a profit?
So one of the challenge.
Yeah, and also people, so I have up my numbers, the full-time MBA. And this year we had so when I took over the team, we were actually struggling. This year we have had huge success in full-time MBA admissions. A number of people who want to join, massive waiting list. So we up the numbers to 200. So what do I do now? I immediately go around scouting for fresh faculty. I'm hiring PhDs and so on. And office space, this, that, and that. All the works are. But suppose I don't get to 40 next year. What do you think I should do? Keep people and feed them. Fortunately, salaries are not very high in academia. So you can absorb and then break-even points are low. Yeah. So you can absorb for something. But in your kind of organizations where people are stretched for margins, for example, his organization, margins are not very high. They're fighting for those margins. Yeah. Your margins are say 3% or 4%. I can't keep paying you if you're not working. So whether you took a loan for a building or a car or something is your problem. So I always tell most people that when things are very good, what should we be doing? No. When things are very good, what should we be doing? When you're having a party, great increment, bonuses, everything coming your way, what should we be doing? Preparing for the bad times. Particularly younger people, fresh MBA students, they just doesn't occur to them that bad times come. It's all one happy party. Enjoy.
Regarding this, one side we speak about the carbon cost of an email also. Nowadays we are speaking about the carbon cost of one email. So we got into that much of deep. But one side, we massive productions and consumptions of natural resources. They're consuming like anything as organizations. But organization here speaks about carbon footprint. So one side we have global warming, we are increasing. So how can we balance it?
Yeah, so it's a matter of choice. So that's the argument, right? Argument for so you have the city of Amsterdam, which says by 2023, 24, we will ban all advertisements for non-vegetarian food. Think about it. A city in the Netherlands says that we will ban all advertisements for food. Pretty tricky, yeah. So why do they say that? They say that why should you invent inefficient processes? For example, if you want to eat a beef steak, you should fatten that bull or cow or whatever. You feed it, look after it, and then eat it. Why can't you eat the grain only? That is also eating grain. So instead of cut short the entire cycle and eat grain. Yeah, which actually reduces methane gases and reduces carbon footprint. That is the argument that vegetarians actually make. There is also some evidence that it is true that you can reduce carbon footprint substantively if you turn vegetarian. You don't have to take it from me because I'm a vegetarian and I very strongly believe in vegetarian. But so I'm saying this is a bit of a disclaimer. But the fact of the matter is that
we have to think about the future generations also.
yeah, so you can think of in several ways and today it is thrift. So for example, how has India changed? So when I was, I think, a young boy, one of my big pain points was I didn't have enough clothes to wear. Money was tight, families were big, so it was always bothered me. Today, my son has the same number of clothes as I used to have. He doesn't care. He does it by choice. I have about 8 credit cards. He has 1 credit card. Yeah, he earns great deal more than me. But I think the younger generation, the idea of thrift has come. That use less, have less clothes, have less, resources, live economically. It's not the question of how much money you can earn. What is your impact on, say, global warming? Are you adding to green gas or are you adding to the carbon footprint, CO2 emission? So it's a choice. I don't know. Are you a non-veg? Veg.
Yeah, I used to, but now I left.
Very good. Excellent.
I am veg, sir.
So just because I don't want to get extra points. So
Awareness is coming gradually, not about vegetarian, but especially contribution to our environment. There's a couple of countries, the tablet houses is getting more famous, very small, usually a lot of money.
yeah. So why should if you have only 2 people in your family, why should you have 6 people? Big fun. Can you live in but it's a little tricky, you know. So I actually asked my son sometimes because he's very, very careful with all this, but then he will fly from one coast to another coast across America to watch a squash match. Say he'll fly from Los Angeles to New York to watch a squash game. Doesn't that add to the count? So it's a little tricky. You know, where do you draw the line and where you? But I think it'll all come to a head when some country gets submerged and then there is a crisis.
As a whole, as a globe, considering the globe, like World Health Organization or some like great institutions like this, or taken any major steps to mitigate this.
It will be an advisory. So India and China are not signatories to several of these greenhouse laws because they say that the West used it or misused it and they built their economies and now they're trying to stop us. How can you prevent us from using coal, which is the cheapest fossil fuel? And we have got massive coal reserves. So how can you stop us? You had, when it was a good time, you used. Like the Americans telling us don't have nuclear weapons. So we are telling them you disband your nuclear weapons first. Which they are really not ready to do. Unless they walk the talk. So think about some of these things. It's important.
So one more sentence was there as well when you start the presentation. It was by Edward.
Kevin.
Yeah, it is saying that it is not necessary to change.
Not necessarily survive also.
So it is trying to say that if you are not
You're not changing and you won't survive. They say it's not necessary to change, it's not necessary to survive. If you don't change, you won't survive. And all species that have not changed have not. So one of the greatest species that ruled the earth was a dinosaur. You see them now. Some place. Just perished. They could change, they could adapt. Human beings adapt.
change is the only constant.
How much of discomfort are you willing to take? Okay. Okay, guys, see you guys online. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, regarding
Thank you, sir.
Section A has got 5 marks, section B has got 10 marks, section C is a case study, this is 49.
Same pattern for all of them.
Do your alignment well, we have to. Unless you are aiming for the gold medal. Are you aiming for the gold medal? Yeah, somebody will get it. Then they-
Excuse me, sir, I can't hear you.